Hello everyone and welcome back to another round of Tuesday Night Legacy. Tonight we've got round 2 from June 10th. We have Eric playing a blue-white control list on the left, and we have an unknown player on the right playing blue-red Delver. Now this blue-white control list we've seen in the last few months here. It is all about trying to end the game with planeswalkers over creatures, using Narset to gain a ton of value and having that Days Undoing combo so that you lock your opponent out of the game, not being able to draw any cards. The Wandering Emperor provides pressure to end the game, and of course Jace the Mind Sculptor, long enough on the field, also ends the game by himself. This is all backed up by all sorts of removal like Supreme Verdict, Prismatic Ending, and counterspells in Force of Will and Force of Negation, and sometimes Spell Pierce. On the other side of the board, a strategy we're all familiar with, the Protect the President strategy, getting a Delver of Secrets or a Dragon's Rage Channeler into the game on turn 1, protecting that as best as you can for the rest of the game, trying to use things like Force of Will and Daze, and sometimes removal like Lightning Bolt, and even the main board Pyroblast every once in a while, trying to metagame that other blue deck. Also, coming to the party is the Murktide Regent, being able to have kind of a mid-game threat that is extremely difficult to remove, and of course, everybody's favorite new cantrip, Expressive Iteration, to generate as much advantage as possible. And the newest tech to this entire deck is the Mystic Sanctuary, that is able to buy back Expressive Iterations, either by fetching it up just by itself, or by dazing it back to your hand, and then bringing back those Expressive Iterations that way. So control versus tempo. Let's see who gets there. We have the Delver player on the play here, starting with a turn 1 island, always a good strategy, into a Ponder. Ponder, of course, being one of several cantrips. This one just looking at the top 3, getting to choose an order to keep them in, and putting them back on, and then drawing a card. If you really don't like any of those cards, though, you can, of course, shuffle the deck instead, as we see Eric doing here on his side. Then you just get to draw a card. You don't get to know what it is before you draw it, but you kind of make that decision that those other 3 cards weren't going to be good enough. Another Ponder, so we've seen 3 Ponders this game. We are into turn 2 here. No other game actions taken, just an island pass from Eric. Trying to kind of stay ahead of his opponent, hoping that maybe he can be more reactive than proactive. Since the control deck doesn't typically have early game threats, he could potentially play like a Snapcaster Mage or maybe even a Hull Breacher. But with it being turn 2, it's better just to keep up potential counterspells. See a Brainstorm from the Delver side. Brainstorm, another cantrip. This one actually drawing the 3 cards, so you can take cards that maybe you don't need in your hand, put them back on top of the deck, and the true power of Brainstorm is paired with those fetch lands, you can just shuffle those cards away. We see a Dragon's Rage Channeler coming down for a Delver. Arguably a stronger card than the Delver of Secrets itself, as this Surveil trigger from non-creature spells can dig you through your deck quite quickly to get into more gas and more action. Trying to see a Murktide Regent being resolved here with that early Delve. A Force of Will from Eric is going to force a Force of Will from Delver. Eric, not quite done, decides to fire off his second Force of Will, exiling both of his Jace the Mind Sculptors to do so. So this Murktide Regent is countered. And we are going back to Eric. He's going to ponder and shuffle it up again. Drawing a fresh card. He is stuck on 2 islands. You wouldn't even know that he is a blue-white deck here. We're seeing that Expressive Iteration fired off for the first time from the Delver player. So these cards are just going to get looked at. They're not going to be drawn. One gets to be put into hand, still not drawn. One gets to be exiled, that can be played until end of turn, and one goes to the bottom. Exiling that Murktide Regent. I think he's actually going to get there with all of these cards because it stays exiled until end of turn. You can go through combat. So he allows the combat to happen so that he can deal 3 damage and then cast that Murktide during second main phase. We saw a Narset try to come down, but it got dazed. Dazed, of course, just returning an island to hand. Pretty easy cost to pay, especially when you're Delver. If you already have your threat resolved, you really don't care about having extra land or making your land drops on turn. So the Narset going off here, getting the look at the top 4, reveals a Prismatic Ending. Fetching for that Plains, casting Prismatic Ending, getting rid of the Dragon's Rage Channeler. The Delver player, thinking about this here for a second, decides that it does go through and casts a Brazen Borrower on end step. Brazen Borrower just being a 3/3, so that's 8 damage in the air. We can't see the life totals, it's just off screen, but that is going to end the game, and we're going to go on to game 2 here. So Eric starting out with the Mystic Sanctuary because he doesn't have 4 islands, well, 3 other islands in play. It does come into play tapped, kind of signaling that he doesn't have any basic islands in his hand. He wants to go for a cantrip this turn. Saw a Ponder from the Delver player. Putting down a Tundra, probably drew that off the top if I had to guess. See Delver on turn 2 here, deploying the Dragon's Rage Channeler. See at least a counterspell or a Force of Will in Eric's hand, firing off a Prismatic Ending. With that Converge equaling 1, getting rid of that Dragon's Rage Channeler. No contesting from the Delver player. Decides to go to his turn and cast Expressive Iteration. Decides to wait for the land drop in case there was a land in those top 3 to get maximum value from those cards. Did have the land in hand. Exiled the Mishra's Bauble, which not only helps towards the Delirium count for the Delver of Secrets, which apparently he had in hand, but it also gets that Surveil trigger too, since Dragon's Rage is a non-creature spell. It's not just instant sorcery. So we see the Bauble come into play, get the Surveil counter, or Surveil trigger, get to look at the top card, and then draw a card on Eric's turn. Replacing itself, not getting to see any lower, but it serves its purpose. See another Narset come down from Eric. Well, I guess this is a new game. This is the first Narset of the game. Thinks about it, fires off a Force of Will, says, I'd rather you don't have a Narset. Now, Eric does have a Force of Will in hand, but it seems like he doesn't want to pay to keep this Narset around. I'm not sure if he has another Narset in hand. I feel like it's 6 of 1, half a dozen. He could have just exiled the Narset in hand with the Force of Will to keep it around, but I think he's deciding that he's just going to go for the Narset next turn. Wasteland, taking care of that untapped Tundra, destroying a non-basic land. There is the Narset, and a Pyroblast is going to take care of that Narset if there's no answers to it. A fantastic card, especially, well, only in the blue matchup, but since there's so much blue in the format, oh my god. So Force of Will trying to take care of that Pyroblast. A second Pyroblast is going to trump everything else here, so the Narset is gone, all of the counter spells resolved, and the Dragon's Rage Channeler coming in for another 3. It's exactly where Delver wants to be, except it looks like couldn't answer that white Prismatic Ending, loses his only threat in play, decides to go for that Mystic Sanctuary, pulling it out with one of his fetch lands, the Misty Rainforest. This is the 4th island in play, so it not only comes in untapped, but he also gets that Expressive Iteration back from the graveyard. And there's that land off the top, decides to play it, and it's a Wasteland, destroying the 2nd Tundra, taking Eric down to 1 basic Plains and a Mystic Sanctuary, although he rips the basic island off the top. So his mana is safe for now, but he's not actually doing anything. Just letting Delver go crazy here. Cast another Expressive Iteration into another Dragon's Rage Channeler. I think this is the third one for the game. A Cycled Shark Typhoon from Eric is going to get a 1/1 blue shark. Attacking, decides to bin the Typhoon, or the shark. Just a 1/1, so definitely dies to a 3/3. Delver player mushing out this this Murktide region here for just 4 counters. So we got a 6/6 flyer and a 3/3 flyer in the air. Eric, knowing that he has the he definitely has the Supreme Verdict in hand, but I guess he only runs 1 basic planes because he couldn't use that that Prismatic Strands, or the Vista, excuse me, to go and get his second planes because it cost, here, I got it right here. Supreme Verdict costs 2 white and a blue and a colorless, so he was locked out of having his Supreme Verdict, which would have saved him there. So he had the out, but he did not have the mana, and that is going to be the end of Game 2, and that's the end of Round 2. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this content, we have a bunch more videos on the channel you can go check out. Thanks as always to Spellhold Games for allowing us to record in their store. And as always, the deck lists or approximation of the deck lists are going to be in the description below.